So I'd just like to talk a little bit about designing the organisation from top to bottom. The CEO needs to think about their top team and how that's going to be organised. Will the other CEO be in place in some sort of manner? Do we need two CFOs? And so how are we going to put the top team in place? And then probably at least one or two levels below that. If we're talking about small deals, we can think about and plan the whole organisation pre-deal. If we're talking about larger or mid-sized deals, we certainly need to think about the organisational structure and who's in place to be able to give us approximate synergies or good estimates of the synergies pre-deal, so we can use that in our discounted cash flow and come to a good purchase price. But let me just start thinking through how we're going to do this, because many CEOs struggle. They haven't done much of this before, and so just breaking this down into little bite-sized chunks to help you. So starting to think about the current org chart. So let's pull together the current org chart and put that in a spreadsheet. We can have names and jobs, but we don't necessarily need to do that. So certainly think about the country that we're in and the local HR laws that go around how this will work, and whether we're going to put names in boxes at the moment or whether we're going to need to go through a process. And you need to understand local law. Certainly if we're an American company buying in Europe, the laws are different, and you need to have someone locally, certainly a European or a person from the local country, who understands how this should be done. So next, I'd like to ensure that we put the words draft on the page, not for external use and confidential, so that should this go out, we can explain that this was a draft. And obviously if we're sitting pre-deal, we can't be sure what's going to happen, and so this is a draft document. Next, I'd like to add in the target org chart in the next tab, so not in the same place, so that as these two organisations change over time, because it turns out our deal might slip or move. We might not buy the company next week. It might take months or even a year or two. And so we need to be able to understand the starting state or the beginning state, and then we're going to design the end state or the target operating model for our org chart. So then we're going to have in our aiming for our final set of org charts, we can draw our end state org chart. And what we're doing is saying, well, what would we like the top of the organization to look like in, let's say, 2 or 3 years' time, 4 years' time. And then the discussion is that's our end state, or where we want to land. And then what I want to do is draw that back to a much faster timescale. So could we implement that in month 6 or month 12? Do we need to implement some of that on day 1? So how quickly do we need to bring that back? And as we bring that end state back towards day 1, do we need to make interim states? So for example, I had a project where we moved the target CEO. We planned to remove the target CFO, but something cropped up the day before the deal. And so we then left in place 2 CFOs. And we spent quite a while explaining why we needed 2 CFOs. And we split the organization into 2 bits geographically, so that they could both have a bit depending on how they were managing and what they were managing. And so that enabled us to sidestep the problem that had popped up. And obviously we did eventually want to move to 1 CFO, and that was in our plans to do 2 years later. And so are there interim jumps to get to our end state, and can we plan those pre-deal as early as possible? Now, there's always a discussion as to what program we're going to use, what application. So Visio is quite good at doing org charts. That's ideal, but you generally need to pay for that, and that limits who's got it and how people can use it. And so we can use PowerPoint. Again, that is much prettier, and we might need to present the org at some point, and so we'll need to put it in PowerPoint. Quite regularly, just putting it into Excel is very easy. People can move names around and boxes around and job titles, and it's just easy to copy and paste and move things around. And so that might be an easy starting point, which is why I might use Excel to start. Remember, if we're doing larger organizations and we're using PowerPoint, as we move things around over weeks and months, if you lose people or divisions or organizations from your PowerPoint as you move things around, if you present on day one and it's missing a person, that person will assume they're being made redundant. So we do need to double check and make sure this is all absolutely perfect before we present on day one. So now we've got our org chart, there's going to be lots of questions. So have we got the right number of direct reports, and how many do we want at each level? Who's going to be reporting to who, and how are we going to discuss all of these things? Thinking about what questions are useful and going to come up over the next few months in planning and designing the org chart, and how fast do we need to move? And then feel free to give me a call. We can have a discussion at some point and chew the fat around some of these things. So having discussed the org chart at a high level and what the CEO needs to do as a starting point, I'd just like to get a little bit more complex now. So it's very plausible that we won't be able to come up with one particular end state at the beginning. Our first try, we sit down and we might come up with 2, 3, 4 different scenarios, different end states, whatever we want to call them, target operating models for our high level org chart with the CEO down. And so we need to draw all of those different scenarios, and that will enable us to start having a list of questions and having discussions around how we organize it. Certainly the salaries of different people will be helpful and useful and interesting to put in, so we can now put that into our spreadsheet. What does each person get paid, and if we're going to remove both and go and get a new person, what salary or complete package might we want to be thinking about? So understanding the cost of the top people, how much it will cost to remove any of them, and what synergies or savings we might have, and this is all useful as our synergies to go into discounted cash flow. What I'd also like to remember is we probably use our HR director to help us estimate the cost of removing some people. Compromise agreements sometimes are put in place at this level of the organisation. Remember that your HR director has probably done compromise agreements for a particular person in the past, and so their estimates will be based on, if we've got a fully functioning organisation, removing one person over a period of time. That isn't necessarily how it works in this instance. In this instance, we might need to remove 2, 3, 4, 5 people very quickly on day one, and so there's pressure. It's something that the negotiation style will be different because the person knows that we have to remove them and is in a much stronger position. And so also, if you need to remove 5 people, when you go to negotiate with one, they know you're negotiating with others, and if they don't leave, you can't deliver your changes, especially with some of the top people like a CFO or those sorts of people. And so just understanding the cost to deliver these changes might be slightly different to what your HR director estimates. So certainly happy to chat around my experience around that. And also the discussion around how we notice there's different synergies and different go with each scenario, and so understand the cost of the changes to go with that. So coming to an end state early will enable us to think about our discounted cash flow and purchase price well. Hi, I'm Danny Davis. I've helped plan and deliver the European side of a $6 billion deal. We had 30 work streams across 30 countries and 4 global business units. I wrote the book M&A Integration, How to Do It. You can buy it on Amazon, and I've been a guest speaker at London Business School for more than 2 decades on the topic of M&A integration. Give me a call, send me an email, always happy to chat.